Pittsburgh Steelers fans, welcome back to an episode of, well, we haven't had one of these in a long time. It's a Steelers one-on-one. Gosh, well before we started doing 7 shows a day and before we really had our YouTube channel supplanted as a main platform for us. I used to do a show called Steelers One-on-One where I would bring in a guest and we would talk and we would just hash out some ideas. And today I have a very, very special guest, a good friend of mine, Mr. Danny Renn. Danny, go ahead and introduce yourself before I give the background on our relationship. Go ahead.
Well, hey, I'm Danny Renn. First thing, probably the most important thing, I'm not a Steeler fan. So let's just get that out there. But no, me and Jeff, heck, we've known each other for 13 years and we've always enjoyed talking sports, and I'm honored to be here today.
Yeah, so Danny and I used to work together, and believe it or not, he is the person that got me into podcasting. And there's a lot of people, we used to work and we'd sit there in our offices and be like, man, we love sports talk radio. And we said, why don't we just start a podcast? And so we started our own podcast called The Extra Point Show. It was not specifically geared to any one team. We just talked about the National Football League. We loved it. And that kind of grew. And then Danny moved on in his career, and I've took my career in a different direction because he was on to bigger and better things in his career. So I started Steelers podcast and Steelers website, and it's led me here to be the editor of BehindTheSteelCurtain.com. But Danny is actually a Miami Dolphins fan. Now, Danny, why don't you go and tell the listeners how in the heck did a guy that lives in Maryland become a Miami Dolphins fan?
Well, I became a Dolphins fan back in the early 90s. I was around 10, 11 years old. And at that time, of course, there were no Ravens around here. So every week, the NBC national broadcast would normally be the Dolphins. And that's when I started to watch a guy named Dan Marino. And right off the bat, he became my favorite player. And so right around 1992, it was when I really became a diehard Miami Dolphins fan and have never looked back since. It's been hard these past few years, this past decade. But I've stuck with them, and I always will.
Well, this is something that once this, let's flash back to 2019, week 2, the Seattle Seahawks go to Heinz Field to play the Pittsburgh Steelers, and Ben Roethlisberger blows his elbow out. And little did anyone know, and I wrote this article for the website, and I got laughed at for writing it. There were rumors about Minkah Fitzpatrick being traded. And I said, could the Steelers be a player for this guy? And everyone said, no, you're nuts. There's no way. Next thing you know, prior to week 3, the trade is made. Now, right when this happened and I saw that the Dolphins and the Steelers were doing business, I thought about you. You're the first guy I think of when anything Dolphins related comes up. What was your reaction when the deal went through? Minkah Fitzpatrick is gone for a first-round pick.
Well, you got to remember at that time, there was still a lot of national speculation that the Dolphins are tanking. That was what everybody was saying. And so it was kind of painted in the Miami media that, Minkah wants out of here because he doesn't, he sees this as a losing culture. He doesn't want anything to do with this franchise anymore. His mom was even on the local radio down there talking about, well, they're not using Minkah the right way. He needs to play here or he needs to play there. They're not using him correctly. I'm going to tell you, Brian Flores is not going to put up with that kind of thing. And so at the time when they traded him, I actually was fine with it. Especially when I saw they got a first-round pick. If I have a guy that doesn't want to be here, I don't need him there. So I was actually fine with the trade, and I'm even better with it now.
Well, let me ask you this question, because I've heard some speculation, and you keep closer tabs on the Miami news than I do. But why would I even care? But anyways, is there truth to the fact that because Ben Roethlisberger had just hurt his elbow, that there were other teams vying for Minkah Fitzpatrick, and they chose Pittsburgh because they were thinking this team's going to stink without their starting quarterback? We might get a top 10 pick. Now, obviously, they rallied behind some name Mason Rudolph, Devlin Hodges. They are 8-8. It turns out to be the 18th overall pick. Is there some truth to that, though?
Well, there should be. I mean, that's who I was hoping that they were going to trade it to. I was hoping that they were going to trade with the Steelers because at that time, to me, things did not look good in Pittsburgh. So there's no question that the Dolphins were looking at the Steelers and maybe get an 8 or 9, an 8 or 9 pick there in the draft. There were a couple other teams involved, I think, in that. I can't really remember the other teams that maybe had talked to the Dolphins. But there's no question that they looked at Pittsburgh and said, "Hey, let's go ahead and swing this deal. We're going to get a better pick out of it." No question about that.
But so go back into what you said earlier. Minkah Fitzpatrick has been a model citizen since coming to Pittsburgh. Now, he's also had a massive amount of success. He was an all-pro player, Pro Bowler. Since he came on board, and they thrust him into the starting lineup week 3 when they went to San Francisco to play the 49ers, and he he caused a fumble, and then he had an interception in the same game.
I remember.
I'm sure you do. He's been lights out for Pittsburgh, and he's been everything that is expected and then some. What was the issue down in Miami? Because there's conflicting reports. He has never, let me just say this before you talk. He has never come out and said there was one reason or the other why he left. And I think he's trying to cover his bases and not ruffle too many feathers. But what was your take on what went wrong in Miami? Because this guy's a top tier talent.
Okay, couple things. One, Brian Flores was asking him to do something specific. He was asking him to play a specific role in the defense, and that meant moving around, playing on different parts of the field, playing at even different positions, even coming up and playing a little linebacker at times. And I don't think Minkah Fitzpatrick wanted anything to do with that. Then I believe that he was kind of listening into the national media a little bit, that this team is tanking, this culture is terrible, and he wanted out of there. Now, believe me, he was always a model citizen, and he made big plays for the Dolphins. I remember week 15 of the 2018 season in Minnesota. He picked a pass off and took it to the house and kind of changed that game. They were going to lose that game, but you could start to see that he could do some big things. But the minute that he started complaining, I knew that Brian Flores wasn't going to tolerate that. So I just think that Minkah, I think the main reason is he did not see – I don't think he was buying into what Flores was selling. I think that's what it was. And as soon as you make it vocal that you want out of somewhere, I don't know. I think it's sometimes kind of hard to hold on to that person, especially an elite player like Minkah. Now, a lot of Dolphins fans and media wanted Flores to make it work, and they even criticized him that he wasn't able to make it work with what we thought was going to be an elite player, a first-round pick. But I think Minkah made it clear that I don't want to play here, and Flores made it happen and got him out of there. I think that's it.
I tell you what, I mean, it was just so strange because, like I said, Minkah Fitzpatrick I would say that most NFL teams, most NFL fans that pay attention would consider him to be, like I said, a top tier talent. I mean, he was an all pro player last year. You can't deny that. It's not Pro Bowl stuff. Pro Bowl, that's fan voting and all that. All pro is a different story. So Flores, how many years has he been the coach? This is his second? He's going into his third year?
No. He's going into his second year. Going into his second year. And, me, I'm all on board with the guy. And I think that, you're seeing a lot of free agents now coming to Miami. Go back to week 17 last year when the Dolphins go into New England and beat Tom Brady and the Patriots. And I think all of a sudden the narrative is starting to change on Brian Flores and the kind of head coach he is.
Well, because they've accrued a ridiculous amount of draft capital so far this year. Are you comfortable with all that capital? And because to me, let's be honest, the AFC East is up for grabs. I mean, Tom Brady's gone. No one knows who's. I guess you would say the Bills are the front runner now. But I mean, as a Dolphins fan, you've got to like where they sit looking at the upcoming draft, right?
I love where they sit. And what I love about what they just did in free agency is there was no big name haul. I mean, they got Byron Jones, which I thought was a pretty big deal.
That's a good pick.
Criticized it. Yeah. I thought it was a good deal. They got Kyle Van Noy from the Patriots and added in a few other players. Shaq Lawson from the Bills, a guy that comes off the edge a little bit. But didn't break the bank for any of these guys. So you remember a couple years ago when they bring in Ndamukong Suh. We wasn't anything like that. Now, I never had a problem with Suh. I thought he got criticized a lot, but I actually thought he played well for the Dolphins. Maybe not up to the level we thought he would. But as far as the direction going forward, this is the most optimistic I've been about the Dolphins in a long time. And that normally I'm pessimistic.
Very.
You know that. So I'm very optimistic going forward. Now they've got to hit this draft. And it all starts with the quarterback, and they've got to focus on that.
So who do you think they take?
Well, there's one guy I want, and it's Tua Tagovailoa out of Alabama. That is the guy that I'm hoping comes down to Miami. I love him more than any quarterback in the draft, and I would love to see him put on the aqua and orange.
You wouldn't? Would you start him right away?
Well, he won't be able to. I don't.
Health wise, you don't think the hip he's good enough to go?
I don't know if he's ready for game action. Now there was video that came out just this past week of him moving around cones and throwing. That's a lot different than moving around 275-pound linebackers coming at you. Give the year to Ryan Fitzpatrick. Hey, look, Ryan Fitzpatrick he can make this team a wild card team. And I know people are probably out there laughing at me.
Well, the expanded playoffs makes it easier.
That's exactly right. You go to 7 teams. That gives every team another chance to get in. And the AFC East is not exactly loaded. Am I afraid of Sam Darnold? No. Am I afraid of Josh Allen? I'm absolutely not. And, whoever New England brings in. This is a year where I'm not saying that the Dolphins are going to the Super Bowl because they're not. But is 9-7, 10-6, is that in the realm of possibility? I think it is.
10-6? Oh, woo! That's a bold prediction right there.
Well, look at the division. I mean,
don't get me wrong. Who are you paired up with this year? What divisions?
Oh man, yeah. Let me see. I always know this.
I know. Putting you on the spot.
Years in advance. Let's see. We play the NFC South.
Okay.
We play the NFC South.
All right.
So Carolina's a win. Atlanta could go either way. Saints would be tough. No, wait a minute. Is it the NFC? Maybe it's the NFC West, actually. I'm sorry. It's the NFC West.
That makes it a lot tougher.
That makes it a lot tougher. It's the NFC West this year. But if you can find a way to go 2-2 there, and then in the AFC, let's see, we played the North last year. The AFC East and AFC North were paired last year. And this year it's the AFC West. So, yeah. I mean, that's going to be tough as well.
9-7 sounds a lot more realistic.
I'll take it. But 9-7 would be great. You come off a year where you went 5-11, and you find a way to get to 9-7, you're going to be in the hunt. And that's all, as a fan, that's all I ever want, just be in the hunt, especially with the Dolphins, because, I mean, what else have I had to look forward to?
Well, I hope Steeler fans are listening, because they're the Steeler fans, maybe second only to the Patriots, are some of the most spoiled fans you'll ever meet. And most that are at least honest with themselves will say that. If you were to tell them what you just said, hey, we're just in the mix, we're happy, they would say, what? No, Super Bowl or bust. Now, I do want to bring it full circle. And for those that are just joining us live on YouTube, this is my friend Danny Renn. We used to work together. He's the one that got me into podcasting. Lance Williams will tell you it was him. It wasn't. We used to do a show together. He's a Dolphins fan. And if there's one thing about Danny that you need to know, it is that he does not like the Steelers at all. And I would say that he hates them, and he's never liked Ben Roethlisberger.
No.
But I've got to ask you what your thoughts are on the Steelers with their defense vastly improved when you think about going up and getting Devin Bush last year from Michigan, getting Minkah Fitzpatrick, which we started the show off with, Joe Hayden and Steven Nelson. Steven Nelson was such a good acquisition for that team at cornerback last year. And they just have a bunch of first and second round picks riddled throughout the rest of that. TJ Watt. Oh my gosh, how did I forget him? What are your thoughts on the Steelers going into 2020? I know a lot hinges on the elbow of number 7, but just your general take, because I trust and value your input.
Well, I will say this. I mean, if I'm the Steelers, aren't they possibly targeting a quarterback in this draft?
I don't think so, because they don't have a first-round pick. You know that. And so let's be honest, the best quarterback, and I use that term loosely because he played in the Big 12, which has no defense at all, that could possibly be there in the second round that you would value high enough is Jalen Hurts. And do you really want to take Jalen Hurts?
He was the guy I was going to suggest. I mean, I could see Mike Tomlin bringing in a guy like Jalen Hurts, learn from Roethlisberger for the next year or two, or however Ben plays. I mean, I can't see him playing much more than 2 or 3 years myself. But I mean, to me, that's the perfect guy to bring in. And it's just funny that you say that, because that's who I was going to mention. But as far as my perspective on the Steelers, I'll go back to last year. And I've never been a huge Mike Tomlin supporter.
No.
You know that.
Yes.
I thought he did the best job of his career last year. And I know down the stretch they kind of fizzled a little bit. I think at one point weren't they 8-5 at one point?
Yeah, they were sitting pretty. They were looking at a playoff spot.
They certainly were. And then I remember that Sunday night game in Buffalo. That was a tough game to lose. Or was that in Pittsburgh? I believe
That was
that
in
was actually in
Pittsburgh. It
Pittsburgh.
was Sunday night. It was
Yeah,
flexed to Sunday night. Yeah.
right. That's right. But I mean, I just think Mike Tomlin showed the kind of coach he is to get that squad to 8-5 with the way they were decimated with a couple key injuries. I mean, I thought he did an excellent job. The Steelers, you know, as much as I hate to say this, they're always there. I mean, every year, you know, they're going to be in the running to be in a playoff spot and contend for the division and contend for the Super Bowl. Now, it hasn't worked out here recently, but that defense has a chance to be pretty scary, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Offensively, you know, they got some weapons. Some weapons. I think that they kind of need to add a couple here or there, maybe in the draft myself. But anytime you have number 7 back there, you have a chance to win. As much as I hate to say that. And just so everybody knows, I hate the Ravens just as much as I hate the Steelers. I can't stand either one of these two.
This is true.
And, you know, people will hate me for saying this, but Ravens fans and Steeler fans are the most similar type of fans that I've ever seen. I mean, they are mirror images of each other. They just wear different colors. But going into this year, Pittsburgh's got a chance. They got a chance to win the division. I mean, Baltimore's going to be good again. Pittsburgh should be right there. You know, I'll admit that.
You like history and these little quirky facts. Here's one for you. Since they redid the divisions and the AFC North became a division, no team has ever won the division 3 years in a row. The Ravens have won it the last 2. Just so you know. I know you like those little tidbits. There you go. There's one for you.
I absolutely like those little tidbits. I mean, now don't get me wrong. Baltimore's going to be tough again this year.
And they're going to be good.
And I would think that Cleveland will improve. Don't they have to? I mean,
they don't have a quarterback. I'm not a believer in Baker Mayfield at all. You can't watch what he's done the first 2 years and say, yes, he had weapons last year and he did nothing.
Yeah, but I'm not ready to give up on him just yet. I mean, I've seen him make some plays. I think there's talent there. I mean, if you're the Browns, you can't give up on it. You took him number 1 in the 2018 draft. Yeah,
I'm not saying they give up on him. I just don't think he's the long-term answer at the position.
Yeah, I don't know. I need another year or 2 or 3 to really see. I think they'll be improved. That's all I'll say about them. Bengals,
they suck. They suck. But but
there's actually talk that Miami could be interested in trying to get up there and get Joe Burrow. And I'm like, why? Sit where you are. Get Tua, you'll be just fine. Let the Bengals take Burrow and bungle his career.
Well, let me ask you this. Go back to 2000. Maybe I'm not a college football guy. I don't have time. I don't know how closely you follow it now compared to when we used to work together. I had never even heard of Joe Burrow until 2019.
Me neither. I didn't know who he was.
And he was at Ohio State and then transfers to LSU. Why wasn't he so good why wasn't he good enough to play for Ohio State? And then he goes to LSU, has one of the greatest college football seasons ever in terms of stats, and then finishing it off with a national championship, which he played tremendous. I mean, there's a little bit of head pause there for me. I think he's going to be a good quarterback. He reminds me of like a Sam Darnold, though. You know,
I wouldn't even say good then.
Well, Sam Darnold has potential, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And a lot of people that watch then mononucleosis set in. Before we move on, go ahead.
Here's the thing about Sam Darnold. Jets fans were very high on him coming in, but to me, he gets rattled way too much in the pocket. But now, with Joe Burrow, and we'll kind of go back to him a little bit. With Burrow, I totally agree with you, and that's why personally I like Tua more than I like Burrow, because I've seen him do it longer than I saw Burrow do it. But you are right. If Burrow was this superstar, he sure did have a lot of trouble getting on the field at Ohio State, like you mentioned. And I agree with you. To put a number 1 pick and take a guy number 1, and you've only seen 13 games, I don't know. That's a lot to invest.
And he also has small hands. Keep that in mind too.
Yeah, but
I'm just joking. Yeah.
No, but
so there's a question.
True.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I'm just
What we
saying
doing? I don't know.
I mean, that's true. That's true. I'm sorry. We got a little delay on the feed, I guess. Go ahead.
That's okay. So right now on YouTube is our live chat. And so there's people, we have over 40 people there and they're watching on a Saturday afternoon, probably in coronavirus quarantine. And
Yeah.
someone asked the question, as a Dolphins fan, what do you think Minkah Fitzpatrick's ceiling is? Because let's be honest, he's only going into his third year in the NFL and he has, like I said, all pro, Pro Bowl. Those are very good individual accolades. If you were to try to, let's do it this way. If you were to try to compare him to a safety in terms of he could potentially be like that, who would it be?
I don't ever see him in the class of like a Troy Polamalu, if that's who you're thinking of. Because Troy would come up and support the run, and I don't think Minkah does a very good job of that. And you've watched him this whole year. I don't think Minkah was a guy that really liked to put his nose in there.
He wasn't afraid of it. He wasn't like a Deion Sanders.
I didn't say he was afraid, but I just know from watching him in Miami, he was not a guy that you really could rely on to come up and support, and stop the run. I didn't see that. So I don't think he's going to get to that kind of level. I don't really know. I can't really think of a guy. I mean, do I like Minkah? Yes. And I think I actually think he's going to fit better with the Steelers than he would have with the Dolphins, if that makes sense. He's going to have a better career there than I think maybe he would have in Miami, just because of the way they want to use him. So, I mean, if you're talking Pro Bowl, he should be a multiple type player, in my opinion, because the best thing about him is he's always around the ball. Like, he just has a nose for the ball, and he's always there. That's why he has so many big plays. His first game in Pittsburgh, didn't he run a fumble or an interception or something that game in San Francisco? So he's just always around the ball. So he Steeler fans are going to love him as he goes forward and as he continues to go and get better as a player.
The reports are, for the Steelers side of things, that he wants to be a little bit more of a Joker type card in the defense next year. Meaning, if you think about like Troy Polamalu, how he would never really be in the same spot. He would always be kind of, let's call it what it is. He's kind of guessing as to where he thinks the ball is going to be. He reminds me more of an Ed Reed than he does a Troy Polamalu.
Yes. Well, okay. I was thinking Ed Reed, but I didn't want to bring his name up on a Steelers show here.
They might. Hey, Steeler fans might hate him, but you had to respect him. The guy was amazing.
You had to respect him. And I want to go back to something that you just said. You talked about Minkah wanting to be like a Joker. I've even heard him say maybe he wants to be kind of like a Swiss Army knife. Mm-hmm. What makes me mad is that's how Brian Flores wanted to use him. That's what he wanted to do with him down in Miami, and he didn't want anything to do with that. So then I hear those comments, and that sent Dolphins Twitter ablaze. I'll tell you that right now. They were like, what are you talking about? That's exactly what they wanted to do, and now you're going and saying this. So that's where he earned a lot of enemies in Miami, when he started making comments like that.
Well, let me kind of read between the lines here for you with those same comments, because in my opinion, when I read those, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, you know more than me when it comes to what the Dolphins did. There were reports that Flores wanted him to be more of a slot cornerback than it was any type of deep safety. I think when he's talking about being a Joker type player or, a Swiss Army knife, it's not so much playing slot. It's having the freedom to kind of maneuver himself around like Troy did so much pre-snap. And it was really funny to hear Bill Cowher and Troy Polamalu sitting in the same room, because they're both getting inducted this summer, and talking about how many times Bill Cowher was freaking out before the snap. Like, Troy, what are you doing? But he always made it to the right spot. You think that's maybe what he's referring to, and it was just kind of misconstrued?
Honestly, I don't know what he's referring to. It didn't make sense when he said that. I'm serious about that. I think it all goes back to he saw the writing on the wall in Miami. He saw that it might be a tough year, and it was a tough year. And I just think he wanted out of that. And then maybe he blamed, Flores wanting him to play multiple positions or slot corner or something like that. The thing is, he's a good slot corner. He's actually a very good cover guy. If you watch him, in my opinion. So I just think that he started buying into the narrative that this was going to be a tank season and this is a losing culture. I mean, you had people you had people on like Get Up and Mike Greenberg, who's an idiot, saying that saying that what the Dolphins were doing was despicable and all this kind of stuff. Like he knows, he had no idea. And so I was one of the fans that I wanted them to win. I don't ever root for losing. I always want to win. So when they started winning games later on in the year and kind of proved that they weren't exactly tanking, just as a Dolphins fan, I was so happy to see that. So, now, a lot of Dolphins fans want to kind of throw things at Minkah on Twitter and things like that. To me, let's just let that go. He's not a player on the Dolphins anymore. He's a player for the Steelers. I wish him well.
And the Steeler fans are happy to have him. I mean, my gosh, what a great addition he was. And I think
and the Dolphins are happy to have that first round pick. So
absolutely.
I think everybody won in that trade. Everybody won in that trade.
Right. I think the Dolphins, like you said earlier in the show, were hoping to have a higher pick, a top 10 pick. And getting the 18th overall pick is not a bad pick. But at the same time, Steeler fans are like, hey, we have a first round pick. It's just Minkah Fitzpatrick. And then we'll see how it plays out.
Yeah. I totally agree. And just remember the Dolphins could package that 18th pick with the 5th pick that they have. If they feel like they have to go up a slot or two, they may have to use that pick as a little bit of ammunition to get the quarterback they want.
Absolutely. It's all draft capital, and we know that can go a long way. And they have a lot of picks. How many overall picks do the Dolphins have? Do you know off the top of your head?
I think 14.
Shut up. 14 picks? Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
There's no way. There's no way as a Dolphins fan, if I were sitting there, I don't want them to have more than 10 picks. I want them to be packaging stuff and moving up, moving back. You don't want 14 new players, do you?
No, and I don't think there's any way they will actually make 14 picks in this draft. I think you will see them packaging picks together to move up if they have to. I still think there's a possibility they'll trade up to make sure they get Tua. And then I think you'll see them wheeling and dealing as the draft goes on. So, no, they're not going to I don't see them bringing 14 new players.
Holy cow, 14 draft picks. My gosh, that's insane. Yeah. Let's go to let's remember. Yeah. Go ahead.
But you got to remember they also got the Houston first round pick
for Tunsil
this year and next year for Laramie Tunsil. I mean, so all throughout September, they were wheeling and dealing and just accumulating picks. And, now they have a lot of ammunition to be able to do what they want.
Old gas mask Tunsil.
Hey, he's a good player, but I'll
great player.
First rounders for him.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
okay.
Absolutely.
We've talked about the Minkah Fitzpatrick stuff and the Dolphins Steelers for about 30 minutes. And so let's shift gears a little bit for those that are, no, we love just talking about the NFL, just National Football League news. Yeah. And Danny and I used to sit in our office when we worked together, and we would try to predict that first game of the season, that Thursday nighter, which how stupid was it in 2019 that they had Bears Packers on Thursday night? I thought that was dumb.
Well, I didn't mind it because it was the 100th season.
But no one cares about Bears Packers anymore. Do that on Sunday night and then have Thursday night be the big game.
I was fine with it. It was kind of a tribute to the tradition of the league. You don't have there's no rivalry that's older than Bears Packers. I was fine with it. But yeah, I agree with you that nobody gets into that rivalry anymore. But for what they were trying to do, I was okay with it.
So who do you think is going to be this year? Who are the Chiefs going to play?
Well, that's a great question. And I wish I had the matchups here in front of me. You probably have it there. Who is the AFC West paired up with?
Let me look it up. I know that the Ravens will be on the schedule because they're first place. It's a first place schedule.
I don't think they go to Kansas City. I don't think they go to Kansas City. I think Kansas
Let me look it up.
Baltimore. Look that up.
Okay. Would you go division rival?
No. Do you want to see Denver? No. I mean, when they were talking about possibly Tom Brady going to the Chargers, then all of a sudden I was like, wow, wouldn't that be a nice Thursday nighter? But now that he signed with the Buccaneers, I actually think Kansas City goes to Tampa Bay this year.
Okay, here you go. You ready? Here are the teams that the Chiefs play at Arrowhead this year. The Atlanta Falcons, the Carolina Panthers, the Broncos, obviously, Houston Texans. That's one to write down. The Raiders, obviously. The Chargers, obviously. This would have been a gimme, but without Tom Brady, the New England Patriots, like you said, that they go to Kansas City this year, and then the New York Jets. Oh. That's it. That's bad. That's slim pickings. You have to pick the Texans, right?
I think you have to, but let me ask you this. Are the Texans thinking about, could they possibly be trading Deshaun Watson? Did you see all of that talk that these past couple weeks about him being very unhappy about Hopkins being traded?
I would be unhappy too, wouldn't you?
Well, yeah, I would be unhappy, but I mean, they can't trade him. He's their franchise quarterback. I mean, of course, you want him to want to be there. And here I sat here talking for 30 minutes about Minkah Fitzpatrick not wanting to be in Miami. But my goodness, if they trade him, then they really are deciding that they're going to tank. But as long as Deshaun Watson is there, then the Texans, Chiefs, you almost have to go with that.
Unless you go within the division. I mean, the Raiders, maybe they've made some moves this offseason, and you could do a divisional game. I don't think they like to do divisional games in week. Well, that's not true because the Steelers have played a bunch of divisional games to start the season.
Yeah, but they normally don't do a division game on the first Thursday night of the year. I mean, man, I don't know when the last time they did that. I remember the Giants, I believe they hosted the Redskins back the opening Thursday night. That's been years and years ago. But I don't know when the last time a division game was in that opening Thursday night, or they normally stay away from that.
Because, I mean, even if you look at the NFC teams that are coming to town for the Chiefs, you have the Atlanta Falcons. So Matt Ryan, will they rebound and from 7-9? That's not a sexy game. Carolina, if Cam Newton was back, yes. I mean, Teddy Bridgewater is not going to be a pushover, I don't think, but it's not. There's no sex appeal or juice, as we'll call it, to that game. No. And then the Jets and the Patriots. The Patriots, now, here's the thing. If the Patriots get if they were to somehow get Cam Newton or they pick up Jameis Winston, that changes things. But you got to think, I mean, we're almost in April already, which is normally when the schedule is released. Isn't it in April?
Yeah, about the third week.
So
yeah, they normally release it normally it's the week before the draft they release it.
That would be the third week, because the draft's at the end of April this year. So for me, it's like they've got to know that matchup already, But we'll see. So you're picking.
They should.
And so your pick is the Texans then.
Yeah, and you know what? I'm not even that excited about that personally.
That's not good.
But here's the deal. I mean, normally, yes, the Super Bowl champions open up on Thursday night. But who's to say the NFL doesn't change things up this year? I mean, we haven't heard that that's definitely going to be the opener. Who's to say the NFL looks at this and says, wow, none of this is very good, and possibly moves the Chiefs to Sunday night like they did last year with New England. They put them on Sunday night, and they put another game in, to open the season. I mean, who knows? I've seen the NFL do some crazy things before.
Yeah, you're right. And you're an AFC East fan. Tom Brady going to the NFC, how big is that? I mean, he's a 42-year-old quarterback. It kind of reminds me back when, Brett Favre was still hanging around. He was still effective late in his career up until the end. How big of a deal is it that Tom Brady is no longer in the AFC?
Well, I'm happy. I've had this, witness him for 20 years, just be a thorn in the side of my favorite team. So I'm happy to get him out of the AFC. But do I think he's still going to be an effective player at 42 for the Bucs? Yes, I do. And I think a lot of people might disagree. I think he turns the Buccaneers into a contender down there in Tampa Bay. I think right now, if you try to predict the 6 teams in the playoffs or the 7 teams in the playoffs in the NFC, they're going to be knocking on the door because he's just going to make them better, and he's going to make everyone around him better. So am I happy he's gone from the AFC? Yes, I am. As a Steeler fan, I would think you would be happy to see him gone too, because, I mean, I looked it up just yesterday. I wanted to know when the last time the Steelers went into New England and beat the Patriots.
I could tell you.
And you know when it was?
I could tell you. It was Brady didn't even play in that game. It was Matt Castle. It was at 2008. Yeah. And that was a bloodbath.
2008. They went in and crushed them. But I mean, the Steelers have never beat Tom Brady at home. That's
No.
hard to believe.
Well,
I mean,
as a
that's
Steeler
hard.
fan, it isn't. As a Steeler fan, it isn't based on the fact that they've struggled so much in Foxborough, and Tom Brady is just always one step ahead, as I know you're familiar with. But I mean, I think that the landscape is changing, especially in the AFC. When you look at the young quarterbacks, we're talking about Deshaun Watson, we're talking about Patrick Mahomes, we're talking about Lamar Jackson in Baltimore. It's definitely the old guard of Phillip Rivers and Tom Brady and Ben Roethlisberger being ushered out as this new group ushers in. What's your take on these mobile quarterbacks like Lamar Jackson? Is that sustainable to you?
Well, I mean, I'll echo what a lot of people say. You look at the way the Ravens built their offense, and I thought they did a tremendous job. They brought out all the good things in Lamar Jackson and kind of were able to kind of push aside the negative things. I mean, he came down there in week 1 in Miami, and I mean, he looked like the best quarterback you've ever seen play. I mean, they ended up beating them 59-10. But then you saw what the Tennessee Titans did to him in the playoffs, where they kind of, to me, it just seemed like they tried to keep him contained and make him beat you with his arm. And I'm not saying he's an ineffective passer of the football. I think he is pretty good. But when you take that element of his game, being able to scramble around and make plays and use your legs, when you take that away from him, he becomes maybe an average to an above average passer, I would say.
I don't think he's very inaccurate throwing the football.
Yeah.
If you want to watch a game where you saw him make throws, like what in the world? Go back and watch the game in Week 5 in Pittsburgh, where went to overtime. And honestly, if Juju Smith-Schuster doesn't fumble, they probably beat that team. And that's with the same game that Earl Thomas knocked out Mason Rudolph and Devlin Hodges came in. And there was one pass in particular where he was throwing a side out. I don't even know what he was looking at. Mike Hilton picks it off. It was probably the easiest interception of his life. Yep. I just am not.
I agree.
Yeah, I'm not sold on Lamar Jackson as a thrower of the football. I think it's a scheme. It reminds me of the Wildcat. Eventually, the Wildcat people figured it out. I mean, he's a runner. He's a runner first. You got to be honest.
No, I agree with you. I'm not going to go and say that he is going to, phase out of the NFL like the Wildcat.
I'm not.
That's going too far, as always. But of course, he's a Raven, so I know where you're coming from. But that's where, and I know you hate John Harbaugh.
Oh, can't stand him.
Credit. I know, but I do give him credit for the way that they built that team around Lamar Jackson, because you figure he kind of realized, as you do, that this is not a guy that we can ask to drop back and throw 40 to 45 times. If we're going to win with this guy, then we have to kind of build a package around him. So I give credit to the Ravens for doing that, even though I can't stand them.
Yeah, it's bad. It's bad. But let's I want to get your thoughts on the new playoff format, because that's rolling out this year. And then next season is when we're going to have an extra regular season game. So I don't know how many times on podcasts I'm going to say, but they'll probably finish 8-8 and realize that there's not going to be an 8-8 anymore. There's not going to be any 500 anymore. What's your thought though on this year, the playoffs? What does this mean for like schedule makers and things like that? What's your take on that?
Well, if you're talking about the extra playoff team, I love it. And a lot of fans are out there, leave it how it is. Why are we, changing things around? To me, anything that gives your team a little bit more of a chance to make the postseason, I mean, I'm all about that. And of course, that's coming from the perspective of a guy whose team, has only been in the playoffs twice in the last 12 years in the Dolphins. So, to me, I love the fact that there's going to be an extra slot that is there for the taking. And I also like the fact that only the number 1 seed will get the bye. To me, that's going to ensure that there's more competitive games down the stretch, and that number 1 seed is going to be more valuable than it ever has been. So I like it. I like the setup. I have no problem with 7 teams, and I think it's just going to I think it's going to be more exciting as we go down the stretch, as if the NFL isn't already exciting enough.
Well, it's just like when the proposed changes to the baseball playoffs. I know we texted each other, and Other than
Yeah.
a team getting to choose who they play, I'm all for it because look, I'm a Pirates
Yeah.
fan. You're an Orioles fan.
Yeah.
If
Yeah.
we both know that our teams are awful, all right? But if you were to say that come, post All-Star game break, your team is still vying for a spot, you're going to be invested and you're going to be paying attention. Whereas if it stays the way it is, I'm not invested anymore. I'll still track the team. I'll still know if they won or lost. It's different. It's really different. I think the more teams in, the better it is, even in the NFL, which is tops in our country when it comes to popularity, So it'll be, I think it's going to be good for the game ultimately. What are your thoughts on 17 games? You like it or not?
Well, again, my sentiments are kind of similar to what I feel about the playoffs. I mean, again, you have all these fans that are saying, "Why are they doing this? They're going to ruin the game." I mean, are you serious? I mean, that's ridiculous. You people are going to watch the NFL. I don't care if they play 24 games. You know what I'm saying? Like people would watch, not that they would ever do that, but people are going to watch. And after this 17 game schedule has been kind of in for a couple seasons, it's going to be like we never didn't have it. You know what I mean? It's just going to become part of the fabric of the NFL. It's an extra NFL game to watch. Why would we complain about that? That's kind of the way I feel. And I think that, and I always give credit to the NFL because I think they get very creative with the way they do the scheduling and things like that. And I think they will with this. I mean, whether it's an international game or whatever, or if you build in some of those natural rivalry games every year, they have a chance to really make this something that's great for the fans. And I'm fine with the 17 game schedule. One more game. Heck, let's get the Super Bowl to President's Day weekend where we don't have to wait the day
Yes.
after.
Yes.
I mean, that would be great. And I think they're trying to do that. I think they're trying to get to that eventually.
I think so too. I mean, but you talk about like the 17th game being I think they won a lot of neutral site games. I mean, how cool would it be to see the Steelers and Eagles playing at Penn State? Or I'm trying to think, who would the Dolphins be? Would it be Tampa Bay or Jacksonville?
Well, yeah, I mean, or whoever, but yeah, you have it'd be one of those teams, but Dolphins, Tampa Bay, and play it there in Orlando or something like that. They've played there before in an exhibition game. Could you imagine? I'm just trying to think of some other natural rivalries, but you could play at some of these legendary college stadiums. Go up and play at
Yeah.
Notre Dame Stadium. Have the Packers and Bears play there or something like that.
The
I mean,
big
there's just
house. Go
all
to the
kinds
big
of
house. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. There's Detroit that have the Lions play there, at the big house in Michigan. I mean, there's so many cool things that could happen with this. I mean, I'm definitely a fan of it.
I got to ask the question because let's be honest, right now we are globally in this crazy time of pandemic hysteria. The whole sports world is on hold.
Yeah.
What do you think's going to happen with do you think this is going to impact the NFL? And I don't want to get into your medical diagnosis on the COVID-19,
Well,
but I
we
mean,
could.
he's not a doctor, just say. But no, seriously, I mean, you look at baseball. I mean, they're in a tough spot right now because they're on hold. Their spring training was cut short. You can't just have pitchers go out and start pitching right away. They're going to have to build up their arm strength again. You look at the NBA and the NHL, and they're having issues with what are they going to do with their playoffs. And let's say they come back in May. And do they play games without fans? And just to get the games going again. I'm not expecting you to have the clear-cut answer, but what are your thoughts on just sports in general right now?
To me, and this is on a personal level, it's and I'm not saying that sports are really that important when we talk about people dying and things like that, because they're not, and we all understand that. But since we're talking sports, that has had the biggest effect, especially on my family. I mean, my boys are so into baseball, and for this to happen, and I have 12-year-old twin boys. This is their 12-year-old year in Little League, so their last year in Little League, and to have their season put on hold, and possibly not even playing. I mean, that has been really, really tough to take. And then you look at the national perspective. I don't even know what's going to happen. I do know that baseball has, and they actually came to an agreement yesterday where they are willing to expand the season. I mean, there is even talk about playing the World Series at Christmas time.
Oh my
And
gosh. How?
But you know what? Well, here's why. Here's how. You could play it in domes. You could play it in warm weather cities. So let's say, I mean, I hope this never happens, of course, because I hate the Yankees. But let's say if it was the Yankees playing the Chicago Cubs in the World Series, well, maybe you could go down to Marlins Park and play that if you had to, because the weather wouldn't be conducive in those cities. So what I like about what sports is doing right now is they are trying to come up with alternative plans to make sure that these seasons do happen. So, but like I said, it affects me on a personal level. But yes, it's affecting everybody, because how terrible has it been these past few weeks to have to be working from home and you have no sports to look forward to? It has been rough.
Well, kudos to the NFL for sticking with their schedule because they can. And some people have been saying like it's insensitive for them to. I don't think it's insensitive at all. If anything, it's a welcome distraction from the chaos that is everyday life at this point in time. And the fact, Roger Goodell came out and said we're going to keep the draft on the same date and times. We're not changing it. Good. Try to get some sense of normalcy is not a bad thing. And even if it's not going to look the same, there's not going to be any bro hugs with Roger Goodell at the podium. You're not going to have players holding up jerseys or any. You're going to have the same interviews just via Skype or whatever they're using now, Zoom, whatever. You're going to have the same excitement from the fan base because you just got new players. I think this is awesome. I think it's really kudos to the NFL because they're the only ones that have the capability right now to keep going, to continue with things. Now, there's reports already that they're not going to be able to get their offseason workouts in. Mini camps, OTAs might get eliminated or pushed back. We'll see. I just hope there's a season. But like you said, I'm glad you brought up. This is the youth is all the way up to professionals. Like it's not just it stinks that there's no NBA playoffs or NHL playoffs right now, but or what would be coming up. But there's kids out there that are stuck at home too, and they're like, "Man, I just wish I could go play ball, or I wish I could go do this or that." It's definitely is a trickle down. So I'm glad you brought that up. So,
well, and can you and you used to coach high school sports? Can you imagine a senior right now? A senior getting ready to play their final year for their high school in their particular sport and not being able to have that opportunity. Again, I know there's a lot of more important things in the world, but man, that to me, that's devastating. It's just heartbreaking.
No, I understand. Like I was talking to a colleague of mine in the county and he's a baseball coach and he is, man, I think I'm going to lose my season. I know that when I coached, my prep for that spring season started in November or December. And so you're working and working and working and you're busting your butt and you're getting your players ready. And then all of a sudden, boom, if this would happen. Boy, that would be a gut punch, absolute gut punch. Yeah. So, well, Danny, it's been a great show. I'm glad to have you on for the first time. He'll be back. We'll do this again and talk about other stuff when it's my turn for the Saturday show. Anything else you want to say before we call it a show?
No, I'm just going to say that it was glad to be back with you. I mean, it's been a long time since we were contemplating buying a radio station in Brunswick to try to put on a show. But I'm just glad to be back with you. This was fun.
Absolutely. And thanks for your time. As always, people that are watching live on YouTube, make sure you like this video, give us a comment, hit that subscribe button, notifications, set them up so that you never miss a show on audio platforms, whether that's Spotify, iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, Anchor, you name it. We're there. Even on Pandora, if you just search Behind the Steel Curtain, you will see our podcast. You can check out our content there. This show on audio platform will be up tomorrow morning, so make sure you check it out. And as always, stay tuned tomorrow. The Homer and the Hater show will be probably about the same time on the East Coast. We'll see you then. If not, take it easy, everyone.